All right, so today we're going to just go through solving a complex circuit and make sure that we know how to logically reason through any of these puzzles you might encounter. So here's one example that we have. We've got 4 resistors, and we actually have one more piece of information, which is that we have a 20-volt reading on a voltmeter across the battery. So when we encounter a problem like this, we need to think about, okay, what are we first given? What information do we know right off the bat? And so in this case, we're actually given all the resistances to start with. So R1 is 5 ohms, R2 is 6 ohms, R3 is 4 ohms, and R4 is 10 ohms. So the first thing I can do is, since I see all my resistances here, I can find the total resistance. So I'm going to group these together. I know that these two resistors combined are kind of the same as saying I have a 10 ohm resistor here. So now I'm going to say, okay, if I have this section of the circuit, that means I have a 10 ohm resistor and a 10 ohm resistor in parallel. So I'm going to say 1 over 10 plus 1 over 10 equals 1 over my total resistance just of this section. And so when I do that, I get 2 over 10, make sure we're adding fractions correctly, equals 1 over my total resistance. So my total resistance of that section is then the inverse of 2 over 10, which is 10 over 2, or 5. Then this whole section is in series with this resistor, which is 5 ohms. So it's 5 plus 5, which gives me a resistance of 10 ohms, a total resistance of 10 ohms. Now, additionally, I know one more piece of information I can fill in with my VIR chart. I know that it's 20 volts. So as soon as I know that piece of information, I've got 2 of my 3 pieces of information in my VIR chart. I can say, all right, well then I know this is 20, this is 10. Voltage divided by resistance is current, so my current is 2 amps. Again, I've got 2 blanks now in every other row, so I have to use one of my rules. Which resistor here is going to get all of that current, the 2 amps, the total current that's going through the circuit? Well, this 5 ohm resistor is not in any branch, so it gets all of that current. Boom. So now what we should encounter is we should say I have 2 of the 3 out of V equals IR. So if I have I and R, I have V, which is 10 volts. So once I have those values, I should be able to think of another rule that I can use. Well, let's look at perhaps this 5 ohm resistor getting 10 volts. So if this is getting 10 volts, and I know my total is 20, let's trace a path that might make this a bit easier. If I have a charge and I'm going through this path, I've lost 10 volts here, and I'm going to reach a junction here that maybe causes me to encounter this resistor. This is the only resistor on this path, so if I need to get 20 volts total, and I have 10 volts here, this one has to get the remaining 10 volts before it gets back to the battery. All right? So that's how I know that 10 volts should be going through this resistor. And then since I know the voltage and I know the resistance, I can find my current, which is 1 amp. Now there's 2 different things you could do here. You could say, well, if I know that this is 10 volts, I should know that this is going to be splitting those 10 volts, but I don't necessarily know exactly how it's going to be split up unless I do some proportional reasoning, which we're not going to probably want to deal with. So the easier thing to do is to just say, well, if I know that this is 1 amp, the total is 2 amps, so if I get 1 amp here, that means the other 1 amp has to go through this one. And that means both of those resistors get 1 amp's worth of current, because the current in a series section or a series circuit, like these two are in relation to each other, is going to be constant, or the same. Now if I have I and R and I need V, I can say, well, this is 6 volts, this is 4 volts, and I've got every single piece of information I need. So again, every single problem is different with these complex circuits, but using these thought processes and this logical reasoning, that'll help you decipher exactly how you're going to come up with the values that you might need. Hope that helps. Thanks.